Okay, here we go. I'm going to back this up just a little bit so we can see it better, maybe. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So 5.7, this is a pretty short section, honestly, because now that we know all these different ways to prove triangles congruent, we're going to use the power in that to do something else. And once you know two triangles are congruent, we've talked about what you know then is that all the angles that correspond to all the other angles are congruent, and all the sides that can correspond to the other sides are all congruent as well, right? So we're going to use this thing called CPCTC, which is exactly what I just said. Just hold on. I'll explain it. It stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So, it's like I said, it's what I just said. If you have two triangles you know are congruent, all of their corresponding parts are congruent, right? If you can match them, then you got it, okay? So what we're going to do now is we can do some proofs where the final step in the proof is not simply proving that the triangles are congruent, it's proving that some other piece of the triangles are congruent. But all this does compared to what we did before is it adds just one little step on the end, okay? Because once you've got this triangle, this is congruent to triangle that, then you can, as long as the pieces correspond, boom, there's your next step. This is congruent to that because of this, CPCTC. Okay? And that's going to be your justification. You're going to write that, CPCTC. Or you could write it all out in words if you really want to, but I didn't think you guys would want to do that. Okay? So, let's try this once. Let's say we've got a couple of triangles here. Well, let's not do that. All right, so let's say we got A, B, C, and D. Thank you. Okay, so the first statement here is B is the midpoint of AC. And also angle DBC, and we'll do the other one too. I'll make it easy. Angle DBC and angle DBA are right angles. And I want to prove angle A is congruent to angle C. Notice how I'm not trying to prove that triangles are congruent. I'm trying to prove that angle A is congruent to angle C. However, if I can prove that the two triangles are congruent, do you see how angle A would have to be congruent to angle C? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through that process of proving the triangle is congruent using any one of those methods we talked about, and then using CPCTC to show that angle A and angle C are the same. Yes? Pretty much. That's why I said it's pretty straightforward stuff once you got that stuff down. So, all right, let's actually construct the proof now then. Okay, so get the given down here quick. So B is the midpoint of AC, DBC, and DBA are right angles. Okay, so let's develop a plan. What other pieces in these two triangles can I show are congruent to each other to help me out here? Yeah. Say it again. A, B, and BC are congruent. Okay. And what else can we show that are the same from one triangle to the other? Yeah. Right. And they share DB. That one's congruent. Okay. So if I got those things all congruent, what way can I show the triangles are congruent then? Yeah. Then we got a side angle side situation. And once I know that the triangles are congruent, then I can say A is congruent to C. So we got a plan of how we can go about doing this. Okay. So let's execute it. So the first thing that someone told me was that AB is congruent to BC. Okay. And how do I know AB is congruent to BC? Yes. Got it. Definition of a midpoint. Okay, so that's congruent to that because the definition of a midpoint. Okay, so what else? What should be next then? Yep. Yep, DB congruent to itself. And what's that property? Yep. Reflexive, yep. Okay, so now we've got this one congruent to itself. Now looking at our picture, it looks like, oh yeah, we're ready for side angle side now. But technically in my proof, I have to state that those other little angles I'm going to use are actually congruent. Have I stated anywhere in the proof itself that the angles are congruent yet? No, okay. I know they are, right? But I got to actually write that down. So that's included here. So angle DBC is congruent to angle DBA. And why is that? Yeah. Technically not. Good try, though. I know, yeah, a lot of people probably were thinking that. Yeah? Yeah. It's technically called the right angles congruence theorem, or you could just say all right angles are congruent. Something like that. Okay? The definition of a right angle says that its measure is 90 degrees. We're not using that, are we? Now we know that, and both of them are 90, so that makes them both the same. But technically we're not using that. We're using that right angle congruence theorem. So I'm going to just do this. All right angles are congruent. And that's fine if you just want to state it like that. Now we've got everything. We got the side, the angle, and the side. We got everything we need. So step number 5, triangle ADB. If I go that route with it, take a look at the picture. If I go ADB, how do I need to make the other one then? CDB. Yep, so CDB. And that was using, we said, side angle side. And then our last step then, we got one more. We wanted to prove that angle A was congruent to angle C. Well, like we said, if we know the two triangles are congruent, then all of a sudden, all these pieces are congruent. The angles are all the same, sides are all the same. All of that suddenly clicks in. And I can prove any of those things congruent that I want. And we wanted A and C. So A congruent to angle C, C, P, C, T, C. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. It's a lot of C's. You're right. Done. Okay? So, same thing, like I said, just one extra step at the end. Okay? Some of the questions you guys are going to be looking at, it's going to say, explain how to prove the statement is true. You won't actually have to do a proof. Remember when we talked about just now, let's come up with a game plan of how we're going to get there? You just have to explain what you need to show and why, and then, rather than writing out a whole big old formal proof. Okay? So, let's look in your journals at page 156. and we're going to do a little bit of this, okay? And then we'll be done. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure I had one whole proof with you guys, but this other stuff, yeah, will be good. So 156. And that's not going to... Okay. So what I would do with these is always copy down the picture. Like in your homework, you're going to be working out of your textbook, so you're not going to have the picture right there for you, but always copy that first. And in the picture, mark what else you're going to be able to show as congruent. Because remember, this is like a 3-step process. What are those other little pieces that I still need to match up? What am I going to use to prove the triangles are congruent? And then it's the CP/CTC step at the end. Okay? So this one, what is the other piece that I could still show as congruent? Somebody other than Savannah this time and Dominic, because you guys already answered.
Okay, but I have a question.
Yeah?
When's our final test?
You can ask me that later. Yes? UV and VX? No. That's what I'm trying to prove is congruent. Right? I want to show that UV is congruent to XV, but that's not the actual little extra piece I have. Yeah? You got it. There you go. So those two angles, not because they correspond. Remember, this is important. This is important. I don't want people to put the cart before the horse here, because what you're trying to do is prove the triangle is congruent first, and then only after you've done that, then the corresponding parts are congruent. Okay? So you can't rely on what looks congruent or what looks to be corresponding to do this first step. It has to be, what can you prove for sure are definitely congruent, and then do the triangle congruency, and then do your CP/CTC. So why are these two angles congruent? No, that proves triangles congruent. I don't know, why are the angles congruent? Yeah. They're vertical angles. Okay, so off to the side, the way we're going to explain how to prove the statement is true. So number 1, angle UVT is congruent to angle XVW, and that's because they're vertical. And then number 2, now that I know that, what can I do? Nope, not yet. Yeah. And how do I know that? Angle, side angle. And then the last one, then I can do UV is congruent to XV because of CP/CTC. So it's almost kind of sort of like writing a little proof over there on the side, but you don't have to write out all the given stuff. And I think it's kind of it's a quicker way. You had to prove those angles congruent, why? Those triangles are congruent, why? Those pieces are congruent, why? So it's kind of sort of like doing a half proof that way. But it gets the point across that you know what you're doing, and you don't have to sit there and take all that time to write a big old proof out to do it. Okay? So something like that is sufficient for what I'm looking at here with these. Okay? Question?
Could B be the midpoint of that? Like, could you say, definition of the midpoint technically?
Well, you don't need that for this because this has already been given to you. So that's not false. V is the midpoint. But V is the midpoint of TW. At least that's what you know to start with. After you've proven that UV and XV are congruent, then V is the midpoint of that other one too. But that wouldn't be a step on the way there, though, because we don't know that for sure. Okay? All right, let's go down to number 2 on together. So we come up with a little game plan for this one then. We want to show that TS is congruent to VR in those triangles. So, are there any extra pieces that we need in this one? Oh my goodness. Bless you. Are there any other?
Are you laughing at my sneeze?
No. Are there any other things that we need in there?
I said bless you. Good day.
Remember, this is all being recorded.
Yeah.
Oh, you're being recorded?
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other pieces on here that we need? No. What can we use to prove the two triangles congruent? Hypotenuse leg theorem. You got it. So triangle RTS is congruent to triangle UVR. And that was using hypotenuse leg. Let me back this up just a little bit. Okay. And now that I know that the triangles are congruent, then TS is congruent to VR. And that's because of what? CPCTC. Yeah. That's all you needed for that one. You didn't have to find any other extra pieces that were congruent because the HL was already set up for you. All right. Last one, and then we can get going on the assignment. Number 3. So do we need any other extra pieces to get started? Nope, we don't. We can prove those two triangles are congruent right off the bat this time. We've got triangle JKL congruent to triangle MNL. And then, why do we know that? SAS, SAS, yeah. And then number 2, okay, I want to then prove that JLK, angle JLK is congruent to triangle MLN, and that's CPCTC.